What if we told you that some of the world's biggest economies are turning away from American food? It sounds impossible, right? But in 2025, it's becoming a reality. All across Europe, parts of Asia, and even America's closest neighbors, there's growing resistance to U.S. agricultural products, and at the same time, there's one country quietly stepping in to fill that gap: Canada. From wheat and beef to soy and corn, global buyers are starting to look north. Trade relationships are shifting. U.S. farmers are feeling the pressure. And for everyday Americans, the effects are going to be felt much closer to home than most people realize. So, what exactly is happening? Why is Canada suddenly the preferred supplier in so many markets? And how did American agriculture go from global leader to global liability? Let's break it all down. What triggered the pushback against U.S. farm products? To understand what's happening in 2025, we need to go back just a few years. In early 2023, the United States implemented a series of aggressive trade adjustments. These included new tariffs on foreign steel, tech imports, and agricultural goods. The move was meant to boost domestic production and protect American jobs, but other countries didn't take it lightly. By 2024, major trading partners including Canada, Mexico, and the European Union had already begun crafting countermeasures. And while many of those focused on technology and energy, one sector got hit harder than anyone expected: U.S. agriculture. Why? Because food is political, and for many governments, it was the easiest and most symbolic place to retaliate. By early 2025, restrictions on U.S. grain exports, dairy, soybeans, and processed meats began appearing across multiple regions. What started as subtle changes to import standards quickly became outright barriers. Countries raised environmental requirements, questioned pesticide usage, and in some cases, labeled American goods as inconsistent with new food safety guidelines. It wasn't just about policy either. People's attitudes were shifting too. After years of news coverage around genetically modified crops, factory farming, and large-scale agribusiness lobbying in the U.S., global consumers, especially in Europe, began demanding more from their food sources. Transparency, sustainability, ethical labor, and in many minds, American agriculture wasn't making the cut. Canada's strategic rise. Now, while the U.S. was facing international blowback, Canada was playing a different game. Canadian agriculture, while smaller in scale, had been quietly rebranding itself for years as clean, traceable, and environmentally conscious. Canadian farms emphasized low-carbon practices, hormone-free beef, and strict animal welfare standards. And in a world shifting rapidly toward ethical food sourcing and carbon-conscious trade policies, that image paid off. In 2025, when Europe started tightening restrictions on U.S. corn and soybean imports, Canada was already in talks to step in. When Mexico implemented new pesticide residue standards on grains, Canadian wheat sailed through with fewer hurdles. Let's take just a couple of examples. Beef exports. As U.S. beef shipments to Asia faced mounting inspection delays, Canadian suppliers, particularly from Alberta, saw a 20% increase in orders from Japan and South Korea. Wheat and grains. Countries like Egypt and Indonesia, which had traditionally sourced grain from the U.S., have now signed longer-term deals with Canadian producers, citing more predictable compliance with international safety benchmarks. Even in Latin America, where U.S. agricultural dominance was once unshakable, buyers are exploring other options. Canada has launched new trade outreach efforts in 2024 and 2025 to build cross-border partnerships, invest in infrastructure, and improve the way farm products move through their supply chain. What this means for American farmers. Let's not sugarcoat it. This is a tough moment for U.S. farmers. In Iowa, soybean growers have reported rising inventories as Chinese buyers pivot toward Brazil and now increasingly Canada. In California, some almond and berry growers are facing stricter inspections in European ports, delaying shipments and driving up storage costs. And in Kansas and Nebraska, corn producers are facing uncertainty as governments elsewhere implement rolling bans and environmental assessments that target U.S. crop practices. Some of this isn't new. American farmers have dealt with trade disputes before. But what makes 2025 different is that the US brand itself is being questioned, not just individual policies or administrations. Farmers who have spent decades investing in technology, precision agriculture, and yield expansion are now being told their practices don't align with global expectations. And while the US government has announced emergency relief packages and is working to repair trade relationships, the reality is clear. For many global buyers, the damage may already be done. How Canada played it smart. This shift didn't happen overnight. Canada didn't just get lucky. What we're seeing in 2025 is the result of a long-term strategy. While the US focused heavily on scaling up, maximizing exports, and protecting domestic markets through tariffs, Canada leaned into global alignment, especially with European and Asian standards. Years before this shift, Canadian policymakers started strengthening their agricultural regulatory systems. They implemented stricter climate impact assessments, improved traceability in food production, and invested in low-emission farming technology. It wasn't just to show. These efforts positioned Canada as a partner that global buyer could trust. And while the US was tightening border controls and fighting trade wars on multiple fronts, Canada was building relationships. The Canadian government secured agreements with European countries, updated cooperation frameworks with ASEAN nations, and even expanded market access in Africa and South America, areas the US has largely deprioritized in agricultural trade. In other words, Canada wasn't just growing crops, it was growing trust. One key example? In 2024, when the Netherlands and Germany raised alarm about pesticide levels in American produce, Canadian products passed inspections with ease. That single moment gave Canadian exporters a fast lane into European countries' supermarkets. By 2025, it's no longer about the size of your exports, it's about your reputation. And Canada's brand clean, ethical, cooperative is exactly what buyers are looking for. Why the world wants more responsible farming. So why are global markets making such a big deal out of farm policy? Because the world's relationship with food is changing. Post-pandemic and post-climate crisis, consumers are demanding more than just full shelves. They want transparency, ethics, and sustainability. It's not enough to feed the world. People want to know how it's being done. In this new reality, food isn't just a product, it's a statement. Consumers across Europe and Asia are questioning, how much water is used to grow almonds in drought-prone California? Are farm workers being treated fairly in the US meatpacking industry? Are chemicals banned in Europe still being sprayed on US crops? This is on the minds of both everyday shoppers and international leaders. While US producers argue often rightfully that they follow strict federal guidelines, the international perception has shifted. Meanwhile, Canadian agriculture has leaned hard into this new narrative. They highlight sustainable water use, promote carbon capture in Canada's wide-open farmland, and even brand their pork and poultry as raised with care. It's smart marketing backed by real policy, and it's working. In many global cities, Canadian food products now carry premium pricing, not because they're better in quality, but because they're perceived to be better for the world. That perception is reshaping trade flows faster than tariffs ever could. The ripple effect inside the US. Now, let's bring it back home because this isn't just a global story. It's one with very real consequences for millions of Americans. Fewer exports mean more domestic supply, and that's already driving down prices for some crops. At first glance, that might sound like good news for US consumers. Cheaper food, right? But here's the catch. For farmers and rural economies, lower export demand often leads to lower farm income, and that means smaller margins, layoffs, and in some cases, entire operations shutting down. In the Midwest, local farm groups are seeing fewer shipments and have paused plans to grow. In the South, food factories are cutting back on work hours, and in parts of California, farmers are reducing how much they grow because they can't find buyers. It's not just farmers who are affected. Truck drivers, warehouse workers, equipment suppliers, and entire communities rely on global agricultural trade. Some local leaders are asking for emergency funding, while others want the US to focus more on growing and selling food within the country. But with Canada stepping in and other countries already turning elsewhere, fixing the problem won't be quick or easy. The American agricultural system wasn't built for small. It was built to feed the world. And when the world turns away, the entire machine starts to shake. the bigger picture and the geopolitics behind it. What we're witnessing in 2025 isn't just a supply chain story. It's a geopolitical shift, and one that has serious long-term implications. Food, just like energy or tech, is a form of soft power. For decades, the United States held incredible global influence because of its ability to feed the world. American wheat-fed conflict zones, American soy-fueled global livestock industries. U.S. aid programs helped build food security in dozens of countries. But now that influence is slowly fading with every new trade deal. As Canada strengthens its agricultural ties with Europe, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, it's also gaining diplomatic leverage. Food diplomacy isn't just about prices, it's about partnership, reliability, and political alignment. And in that sense, Canada is playing the long game. Meanwhile, the US is now trying to fix trade relationships it used to count on. Some experts are calling it a rebalancing, as former allies start looking for other options, instead of relying so much on the US, especially when it comes to food and farming. Mexico's new grain sourcing agreements with Argentina and Canada, that's not just economics, that's signaling. The European Union tightening pesticide standards in 2025, that's about setting their own global rules, not following America's lead. Can the US regain ground? Now, the big question, can the US turn this around? The short answer? Yes, but not without serious work. Some American farmers are already starting to adjust. More are looking into eco-friendly farming methods, earning carbon credits, and using clearer labels to show where and how food is made. U.S. farming is strong, but the rules and public opinion still have a long way to go to catch up. In Washington, lawmakers are feeling more pressure to focus on rebuilding trust with other countries instead of just responding with trade threats. That means working better with global partners, following shared rules, and rethinking how American farming fits into a world that cares more about climate and ethics. There's also talk about making the U.S. more self-reliant when it comes to food selling more to Americans, keeping supply chains shorter, and putting money into local food systems. That might help small farmers in the short term, but it won't fully replace the huge profits that come from global exports. Reclaiming America's reputation as a trusted global food supplier won't happen with slogans. It will take reforms and time. What this means for everyday Americans. So maybe you're not a farmer. Maybe you've never set foot on a cornfield or in a shipping yard. But if you live in the US, this shift matters because it affects what you eat, what you pay, and where your country stands in the world. Let's break it down. When exports fall, food prices at home may drop briefly, but long-term. Unstable markets often lead to rising costs and fewer choices. Rural jobs disappear. Communities built on agriculture struggle. And that often leads to more government spending, which means higher taxes or budget cuts elsewhere. Internationally, when America loses its role in the global food chain, it also loses bargaining power. And that affects everything from trade deals to foreign policy. On the other hand, Canada is rising, not just as a food exporter, but as a symbol of trust, sustainability, and cooperation. In a year full of economic uncertainty and political tension, food has become the unlikely battleground, and Canada is stepping up, while America is being told to step back. This isn't the kind of story that makes headline news every day. It doesn't come with dramatic footage or big speeches. But it's happening quietly, steadily, and globally. And for millions of Americans, it's going to shape the future in ways we're only starting to understand. Canada didn't win this game overnight. They built trust. They followed the trends. And when the world turned away from American exports, they were already there ready to offer a cleaner, calmer alternative. So here's the question. Can the US course correct before it loses even more ground? Or is this the start of a new era, one where America is no longer the world's pantry? If this video helped you understand what's going on behind the headlines, make sure to like and subscribe. We break down global shifts like this every week, clearly, calmly, and without the noise. Let us know in the comments, have you noticed changes in food prices or product origins? Do you think the US can regain its role in the global food market? And if you're a farmer, exporter, or someone working in the food supply chain, we want to hear your experience. Your voice matters. Until next time, stay informed, stay steady, and stay curious.